Hello guys, welcome back to LR Anime. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Soul Land 2 episode number 107 based on novel. So let's start. You're just like me all those years ago. Ever since you returned with Hua Yuhao, I haven't seen a smile appear on your face. You're always daydreaming when you're not pushing everyone during training. It must be because of Hua Yuhao, am I right? Wang Chua froze a little, but remained silent. She didn't attempt to argue the point. Zhong Lashuan said plainly, "Do you think you stand a chance?" Wang Chua still said nothing, but unwittingly clenched her fists. "You have no chance, eh? I didn't expect you to be so much like me." Heh. Zhong Lashuan laughed. She seemed to be laughing happily, but tears appeared deep within her beautiful eyes. "Like you?" Wang Chua stared at her with a doubtful look. Zhong Lashuan smiled and said, "That's right. That's because we both love someone that we can't possibly be together with. Perhaps you still have some hope, as you are quite a match for him, after all. But me, heh." She finished the wine in her glass one gulp and began to walk back into the villa. Wang Chua watched her subtly trembling and dejected figure and began to follow her subconsciously. Zhong Lashuan suddenly paused in her tracks. Her back was still facing Wang Chua as she asked, "Tell me, Chua, do women have to rely on men for life?" Wang Chua answered without hesitation, "Of course not." Zhong Lashuan turned around, and her eyes became as sharp as ever. "Then you have to show him that you are stronger than he is. Even if you can't obtain his love, you can't let him see how fragile you are, and you can't let him see your weak side. This is the last dignity that we can have." Wang Chua focused, and could see Zhong Lashuan's stubbornness, and even a little craziness in the middle of everything. She nodded her head forcefully and replied, "Yes." The competition's rules were finally announced the following day, and every participating team received some instructions from the organization committee. Hua Yuhao couldn't help but frown when he received the instructions. The rules were indeed different, just like Elder Shen had said. According to the competition's rules, the entire competition would be split into a preliminary segment and a final segment. Teams representing sects and academies would be competing in the same pools. The preliminary segment would consist of elimination rounds, but these elimination rounds seemed a little different. The arena was designated in a spot outside Radiant City, and not right in the city center like they were originally supposed to be. There was a clause that caught Hua Yuhao's attention. Both the preliminary rounds and the final rounds placed a limit on the arena's diameter, but a maximum height wasn't specified. This was a very simple instruction sheet, but Hua Yuhao began to feel a lot more alarmed than before. What did not setting a maximum height imply? Could there be soul sages among the participating students? That was quite impossible, as becoming a soul emperor was the limit for people at 20 years of age. This also meant that the lack of a maximum height meant nothing at all to soul masters, as most of them couldn't fly, except for some soul masters that possessed martial souls that could. However, this would be drastically different when soul engineers came into the picture. Even four-ringed soul ancestors' soul engineers could soar through the skies as long as they had flying-type soul tools, and they could launch attacks on the ground from the sky. There was no doubt that this clause was extremely beneficial for soul engineers. The Doluor continent was divided into 4 nations: the Sun-Moon Empire, the Star-Luo Empire, the Heavenly Soul Empire, and the Doling Empire. The only nation that possessed masses of soul engineers was the Sun-Moon Empire, and this competition rule practically meant they were being openly biased. The Sun-Moon Empire was being excessively dominant. Of course, the Sun-Moon Empire didn't dare to be too outrageous. There were other changes to how the elimination rounds results would be calculated. Among them, the points would be allocated according to the number of people left in the team. That implied that if one party could defeat all 7 members from another party with just one of their own in the single elimination match, then they would be allocated 7 points, as their party would have 7 people left, and they wouldn't even have to go through the group battle afterward. The reason was because the group battle only gave 5 points, and there was no way the other party could turn the tables around. Of course, it was nigh impossible for one person to defeat 7 opponents in a row in a competition like this. Therefore, if the team that emerged victorious during the single elimination matches didn't obtain more than 5 points, they would have to go through the group battle, and the other side would have a chance to turn it around. Of course, minor scores were also important, and every round's accumulated points would be recorded. These minor scores would be decisive if a unique and unforeseen circumstance cropped up. For example, if there were 167 teams participating in the competition, and there were only 20 teams who made it through the single elimination rounds during the round of 32, the remaining teams that were needed to fill the slots would be chosen with their minor scores, and these accumulated scores would become even more important once they entered the round robins. The teams would be ranked according to their accumulated points during the group stage. The quarterfinals would revert to an elimination format, while these minor scores would determine the losers' rankings. This change in how the points were calculated was a good thing, and it made the entire competition system more complete and organized. The change in competition rules would definitely change how the competition would unfurl. Knocking sounds could be heard just as Hua Yuhao closed his eyes to ponder. Boom, boom, boom. The hurried and forceful knocking clearly announced how frustrated and anxious the arriving party was. Wang Dong'er was still washing clothes for Hua Yuhao in the bathroom, and she hurriedly came forward and asked, "Who's there?" "It's me, Jojo, the Star Luo Empire's princess, Shu Jojo," could be heard from outside. Wang Dong'er turned around and glanced at Hua Yuhao. Their gazes met, and their eyes flowed with faint amusement. The princess hadn't taken too long to give them a response. In the end, Wang Dong'er opened the door and invited Princess Jojo inside. Shu Jojo was wearing a flowing pale gold dress today, and had tied her hair into a bun that brought out her noble and graceful qualities. However, her face seemed a little flushed. Even though she was trying her best to hold it down, there was no way she could hide the dash of excitement in her eyes. The red-dressed old woman followed closely behind Shu Jojo. Hua Yuhao had sought out Zhong Lushuan to find out more about this old woman. It turned out that she had made a name for herself a long time ago, and people only knew that she was called Yi-Man, but nobody knew her surname. Her martial soul was the Cloud Fan, and she was also the titled Doluor Star Cloud. According to Zhong Lushuan's information, the Star Cloud Doluor hadn't reached rank 95, so she wasn't a transcendent Doluor yet. Rank 95 wasn't that easy to breach, and going beyond rank 95 was a level that was far superior to the one that normal titled Doluor reached. "Greetings, Princess. Please, have a seat." Hua Yuhao was sitting on his wheelchair, and he tilted his head towards Shu Jojo courteously. Shu Jojo knew that she had to be as calm as she could be in a time like this, but there was no way she could calm herself down, no matter how hard she tried. The Star Cloud Doluor had returned in the morning, and Shu Jojo thought she might go crazy when the field test results were reported to her. What she was feeling inside could no longer be described as astonishment, and she eagerly headed to Hua Yuhao's room immediately afterwards. Shu Jojo took a deep breath and forcefully suppressed the emotions that were roiling in her heart, and she looked at the youth before her that could only move one arm. Hua Yuhao was all smiles, and he seemed as harmless as ever, as if he had no idea what the princess was doing here. "Hua Yuhao, I'm sure you know why I'm here." Princess Jojo had seen and experienced many different situations after all, and she ultimately managed to force her emotions back even though she was stirred up inside. Hua Yuhao nodded, and he swiftly withdrew the smile on his face. He said angrily, "You must be here because of the competition's new rules. The Sun Moon Empire is too outrageous. They didn't set a height limit for the competition. This is a rule that's almost specially created to benefit the Sun Moon Empire's soul engineers." Shu Jojo was slightly taken aback. "What did you say?" Hua Yuhao handed the instructions in his hands to her. Even though Shu Jojo was thinking about something else, the big competition was still extremely important, and she still had to pay attention to it. Shu Jojo briefly scanned the instructions and immediately understood what Hua Yuhao was trying to say. Her eyebrows locked together as she said, "What do you think we should do?" Composure took over the indignant look on Hua Yuhao's face. "We should collectively protest against it." Shu Jojo grunted and said, "And you think that will work?" Hua Yuhao smiled and said, "We still have to try. At least, we have to give them some pressure, so that they won't add anything else afterwards." Shu Jojo tiled her head and said, "We'll discuss this later. We've experimented and field-tested your Zhuge Divine crossbow cannon and the milk bottle that you've given us." Hua Yuhao's expression remained unchanged. "How did it go?" Shu Jojo stared at the casual smile on his face. She really wanted to pinch him as hard as she could. She muttered coldly, "Are you very proud?" Hua Yuhao reacted in shock. "Am I? Then what are you smiling about?" Shu Jojo answered angrily. Hua Yuhao didn't know whether to laugh or to cry. "Isn't smiling a form of respect for you, princess? If you're not willing to see my smile, then I won't." He withdrew his smile as he spoke, and he put on an upright and solemn look and posture. Shu Jojo looked on as this guy in front of her put on a serious and professional look, and she didn't know whether to laugh or cry. The awkward indignation in her heart dissipated a little. "We've experimented with and field-tested your Zhuge Divine crossbow cannon, and that sealed milk bottles of yours. They're very good. Do you think you can give us a discount if we purchase them in bulk?" Princess Jojo regained her composure in an instant, and she leaned back on the sofa gracefully as she spoke. Hua Yuhao shook his head and said, "I'm afraid that's not possible." "Not possible? Do you know how many of these we're going to purchase?" Princess Jojo sounded a little more high-pitched than before. Hua Yuhao shook his head and said, "I don't know how many you wish to purchase, but I imagine it must be quite an amount. All I know is how much the Tang sect can produce. As of now, our soul tool manufacturing department is undergoing a second expansion, and much of our labor has gone toward that endeavor. Therefore, we are very limited in the amount that we can currently produce. Furthermore, even though I feel a little embarrassed to say this, I have another piece of news for you. I've just received news from the Tang sect that the price of our products might be inflated by about 30% due to resource scarcity and a lack of materials. Please forgive me, princess." "What?" Hua Yuhao. Shu Jojo was immediately riled up, and she leapt to her feet as her perky chest pumped up and down. She gritted her teeth and said, "It hasn't even been 2 days, and you're playing me already?" Hu Yuhao shivered all over and said, "I wouldn't dare to think of it. You can't say things like this, princess. I still have to find a wife." Shu Jojo felt as if she were going insane. This guy was just too hateful. Wang Donga was behind Hu Yuhao, and she discreetly pinched him in the back. This bastard, he's twisting her words, and yet he's making himself sound so logical, as if he's right. She was also a girl, and Wang Donga was starting to sympathize with Princess Jojo. Of course, she was dressed like a guy at the moment, so she couldn't express anything that resembled a girl's emotions, so she could only lower her head and force back her amusement. The star cloud Doluor immediately became a little unfriendly. She lowered her voice and said, "Do you know what you're doing? Karma will find you if you go back on your word." It was obvious that her words were hostile and threatening. Hu Yuhao heaved a faint sigh. He forced a laugh and said, "I'm so sorry. I don't wish for this to happen either. But you guys also know the Sun Moon Empire has monopolized 70% of the continent's rare metals, and they've prohibited exports. The Tang sect has just been re-established, so how can we have any channels or avenues to purchase resources and materials in bulk? Thankfully, Shrek City is developed and wealthy enough. Otherwise, we might not even be able to guarantee delivery and supply of our goods. The lack of resources and materials will undoubtedly lead to a rise in price. There's nothing I can do about that." Shu Jojo said angrily, "Enough with that nonsense. The few of you make the decisions within the Tang sect anyway. Furthermore, do you dare to claim that the Tang sect is not related to Shrek Academy in any way? How can you guys lack materials and resources with Shrek Academy redirecting resources from Shrek City? Furthermore, all you need to craft your Zhuge Divine crossbow cannon is some relatively high-density steel." Shu Jojo was responsible for the Star Luo Empire's intelligence, so she wasn't that easy to deceive. Hu Yuhao sighed and said, "Since that's the case, then you can find out how many customers we have at the moment. Both the Heavenly Soul Empire and the Doling Empire are both important business partners for us. You're right, our Zhuge Divine crossbow cannon's outer body only requires tough steel. But what about its formation arrays? Can we actually craft these formation arrays without rare metals?" Shu Jojo laughed coldly and said, "We can't take apart its formation arrays anyway. It will explode if we do that, so you can say whatever you want about it." Hu Yuhao frowned and said, "Princess, if you keep negotiating with me with such a rejecting attitude, I believe there's no need for us to continue this negotiation. If we want to be partners, we have to build this partnership on mutual trust and benefit as the foundations. I'm really sorry about the rise in price, but there's really nothing we can do about that. How about this? You can go back and cool off, and you can calculate how much our Zhuge Divine crossbow cannons and our sealed milk bottles are worth after the inflation before we continue any further negotiation." Shu Jojo grunted furiously before she started walking out of the room. She seemed enraged, but she was extremely calm inside. She was clear that she had been completely defeated by Hu Yuhao in this negotiation, and there was no other possible outcome than accommodating his demands if they continued with the negotiation. But she was absolutely unwilling to do that. She believed that Hu Yuhao and the Tang sect would never give up a customer as big as the Star Luo Empire. Right at this moment, knocking sounds could be heard once more, and Princess Jojo halted in her tracks as she was walking to the door. Wang Donga walked over to open the door, and there were 2 pretty girls and a middle-aged man standing outside. The person standing in front of the group was a young girl in a long white dress. She had a certain cold and crisp quality about her, and her features were very attractive. This girl was also mildly surprised when Wang Donga opened the door, and her eyes seemed to be searching her memory as she mumbled, "You. Who are you?" Wang Donga smiled and said, "What? Don't you recognize me, Mu Shui? I'm Wang Dong. We've been acquainted for some time." Donga dressed like a guy was something that most girls couldn't resist. Even though Wang Dong used to have short hair, her unrivaled good looks were enough to enchant every single girl. Mu Shui cleared her throat, and the iciness on her face melted a little. "Oh, it's you. When I last met Hu Yuhao, the girl beside him looked a lot like you." Wang Donga answered plainly, "Her name is Wang Chua, and she's part of the team representing Shrek Academy. I believe you will meet her soon during the competition. She's your sister?" It was clear that Mu Shui's eyes sparkled with curiosity and the desire for gossip. Wang Donga smiled. "Are you here today to ask me about such things?" Mu Shui froze, and she shot a faintly resentful look at her as she said, "Can we go inside now? Is Hu Yuhao around? We've already conducted experiments and field tests with the item that he's given us. We're here today to talk about becoming business partners." Wang Donga opened the door and made a gesture to invite them inside. The 3 of them entered the room, and they ran straight into Princess Jojo, who was just standing there. Shu Jojo's eyes didn't pause on Mu Shui, and she looked beyond her at the second girl behind her. This girl was wearing a long yellow dress, and she seemed extremely gentle. Water seemed to meander within her beautiful eyes, and Shu Jojo could still feel that subtle tenderness even though she was looking her from afar. This girl was even prettier than Mu Shui. "Wei-ena!" Shu Jojo exclaimed. The young girl looked at her and said, "Why are you here, Jojo?" The yellow-dressed girl's pleasant voice could be heard as she took a few steps forward. She had a look of pleasant surprise on her face. Wei Yina and Mu Shui were part of the company from the Heavenly Soul Empire that Hu Yuhao and Wang Donga had run into when they were inside the Great Star Do Forest. The middle-aged man that had accompanied them here today was Mo Feiyun, the same man that led the group back then. Hu Yuhao turned his wheelchair with one hand, and he smiled at Mo Feiyun. "Greetings, Uncle Mo. It's been a while." Mo Feiyun was astonished when he saw the state that Hu Yuhao was in. "Yuhao, you." Hu Yuhao forced a laugh and said, "I was in an accident. I can only move this arm at the moment." He moved his right arm as he spoke. Mu Shui and Wei Yina looked over when they overheard Hu Yuhao and Mo Feiyun's conversation. Mu Shui was also momentarily stunned when she saw Hu Yuhao sitting in a wheelchair. What happened to you? Why are you like that?" It wasn't too long ago that she had met Hu Yuhao and Wang Chua. She had never expected that this energetic and fearsome youth from before would be a cripple when they met again. Hu Yuhao laughed mockingly at himself. "Perhaps this is my punishment for trespassing over the airspace of the Heavenly Soul Empire's capital city. Greetings, Mu Shui. Hello, Wei Yina. Hello." Wei Yina stared at Hu Yuhao, and it was clear that her eyes flowed with faint pity and sympathy. It was a terrible thing for a soul master to be able to move only one arm, but he seemed very open-minded about it. The organizing committee had allocated the lowest tier room to the team from the Tang sect, and there were now so many people standing around inside that it felt a little packed. Hu Yuhao looked at Shu Jojo and said, "Aren't you going back to think about this, princess? I won't escort you out, then." Shu Jojo stared deeply into his eyes. She grunted coldly and said, "I haven't seen Wei Yina in a long time. I'm going to accompany her for a little while more." Her eyes gradually became a glare as she spoke. There was no question that Hu Yuhao had planned this seemingly coincidental encounter. Hu Yuhao naturally understood what she was trying to say. He laughed bitterly and said, "Would you believe me if I said this was all a coincidence? What do you think?" Shu Jojo raised her chin. "All right. Then think of it as if I've planned it." Then, Hu Yuhao said exasperatedly, "My place is a little small, everyone. Please have a seat however you like." Hu Yuhao was a little surprised as the person that spoke to him amongst the three of them wasn't Mu Shui or Mo Feiyun, it was Wei Yina, the seemingly fragile and gentle girl. She stepped forward with a smile on her face and arrived before Hu Yuhao. "Hello, Yuhao. Can we discuss this in private?" Hu Yuhao sounded a little helpless. "Look, the room is only so big. I'm afraid that speaking in private will be quite difficult." Wei Yina said, "If you don't mind, I can push you into my room. I'll send you back once we finish our negotiations." "No." Two different female voices could be heard exclaiming at the same time. Wang Donga wasn't one of them. The voices belonged to Mu Shui and Princess Jojo. Urgency and hastiness returned to Shu Jojo's eyes, while Mu Shui's eyes flowed with vigilance and wariness. Wang Donga was smiling to one side, and her smile was a little strange and sinister. However, nobody else but Hu Yuhao paid any attention to her. Hu Yuhao said exasperatedly, "Please, everyone. I'm just a cripple." Mu Shui grunted and said, "It doesn't matter, I have to be present. I'll accompany Wei Yina for the negotiations, and then I'll send you back." Shu Jojo's face turned black as she said, "No way. Can't you see that we're discussing official business? I should have priority since I came here first." Mu Shui glanced at her and said, "You must be the Star Luo Empire's Princess Jojo. If I'm not wrong, you were just about to leave when we arrived. This means that your negotiations are over, and it's our turn now." The two girls stared into each other's eyes, and intense sparks seemed to fly. Wei Yina glanced at Hu Yuhao rather apologetically, and then she turned towards Shu Jojo. Did Hu Yuhao deliberately plan this meeting? Actually, he didn't. Hu Yuhao had guessed Mu Shui's status, and he had tried to find out more about the Heavenly Soul Empire when he was still at the Tang sect. The Heavenly Soul Empire also shared a border with the Sun Moon Empire, and their situation wasn't that much better than the Star Luo Empire, while their national strength was actually far inferior. It was likely that the Heavenly Soul Empire would be in much more danger. Hu Yuhao had been investigating further through Shrek City's intelligence agency when he realized to his surprise that the gentle and beautiful girl, Wei Yina, was the Heavenly Soul Empire's princess. Even though her status still couldn't compare to Shu Jojo's status in the Star Luo Empire, she was still a princess. Hu Yuhao let Nana observe everyone in the lobby who came to register. She realized there wasn't anything difficult about Mu Shui and Wei Yina. As a result, she sent a letter that came from the Tang sect, along with a storage-type soul tool containing a Zhuge Divine crossbow cannon and sealed milk bottle over. No matter how intelligent Hu Yuhao was, he couldn't possibly manipulate time so well that both parties would meet. It might even not be a good thing for them to meet. That was why he was also very helpless. Shu Jojo suddenly turned her gaze to Hu Yuhao. "Tell me, what do we do?" Hu Yuhao looked at both parties, and everyone's attention was drawn to him. After thinking for a moment, he said, "I'll need everyone to suffer here in my humble abode for a while. I'm clear on your goals. Let's do it this way. Since both parties representing the Star Luo Empire and Heavenly Soul Empire are here, we'll carry out an open discussion. Both of you are Tang sect clients, and we'll do our best to be fair. What do the two of you think? Wait a minute. Shu Jojo interrupted Hu Yuhao suddenly. At such a timing, she revealed her strong character. Hu Yuhao, let's follow the price that we agreed on earlier. However, we'll need to take priority. I won't bargain with you either, but this sum of money is too astronomical. If you need it, we can make an exchange with some rare metals totaling to the same value. Hu Yuhao's eyes brightened. To him, rare metals were better than gold soul coins. What he said before wasn't a lie. More than 70% of the rare metals in the continent had been taken by the Sun Moon Empire and stored for potential use in a war. Even the illustrious Virtue Hall had to seek approval from the imperial family and military if they wanted to use some for research. If the Star Luo Empire could retrieve some rare metals to exchange for the cannons, it would undoubtedly be great for the future development of the Tang sect's Soul Tool Hall. However, Hu Yuhao didn't rush to agree at this moment. After everything that he had been through, his mindset had transformed greatly. He was calmer in dealing with things. Priority. Sister Jojo. Wei Ena called softly. Shu Jojo twisted her head to look at her and revealed an apologetic look. She said, Wei Ena, I won't hide it from you since we are all here for a reason. We are under great pressure from the Sun Moon Empire. It concerns the survival of the empire. While we are good sisters, there are some things that I can't give in to you on. Wei Ena nodded gently and said, I understand. Hu Yuhao, the Heavenly Soul Empire is willing to increase our bid by 10%. We want priority. Hu Yuhao was in a momentary daze. He didn't expect her to be so decisive. Furthermore, the purchasing price of the Zhuge Divine crossbow cannon and sealed milk bottle wasn't small. She actually initiated an increase in her bid. This wasn't just about how bold she was. It also signified her position in the Heavenly Soul Empire. Shu Jojo was also stunned for a moment. After that, she looked dismal as she said, Wei Ena, you are very good at concealing yourself. Wei Ena smiled and appeared as gentle as before. Sister Jojo, you are right. There are some things that I can't help if I'm representing my empire. I just hope this doesn't affect our relationship. Shu Jojo gritted her teeth. In terms of wealth, the Star Luo Empire wasn't inferior to the Heavenly Soul Empire. However, would the increase in bids stop if they continued like this? After the experiments, she was determined to get these two soul tools that could greatly increase the fighting strength of the Empire's military. What should she do? This was a question that popped up in Shu Jojo's head. A cold snort caused the temperature in the room to dip. A strong aura spread from the star cloud Doluo Yiman and suppressed the people from the Heavenly Soul Empire. Mo Feiyun, who was standing at the front, subconsciously retreated and unleashed his soul rings as he was pressured. Even though Mo Feiyun was already an 8-ringed soul Doluo, his face still turned serious against a titled Doluo. Princess Jojo was shocked too. Just as she was about to stop the star cloud Doluo, a cold aura spread from Wei Ena's body. The temperature in the entire room dipped significantly, and a majestic aura surged. The star cloud Doluo's expression changed, and she quickly blocked Princess Jojo. There was one more person beside Wei Ena. This person's body was engulfed by a deep blue cloak, and thus it was difficult to see what she looked like. However, it was possible to tell that she was a lady. The aura came from her body. It swallowed the aura that the star cloud Doluo unleashed. How strong was it? Transcendent Doluo? Man Yi's expression turned dismal. Even she didn't realize when this person had entered the room. This showed that there was a gap in their cultivations. This gap also signified that she couldn't challenge this person. There was only one possibility. That person was a transcendent Doluo. As Wei Ena lifted her right hand, the aura retracted, and she sighed. Sister Jojo, do we have to do this? We shouldn't be opponents. Shu Jojo also sighed and said, we were reckless. I apologize. Alright, I'll follow your raise. We'll add 10% to our bid too. Ladies, please don't do this. Hu Yuhao suddenly made his move. The two ladies looked at him at the same time. They didn't appear very friendly as they looked at him. Adding another 10% to their bids made the price of the soul tools even more costly. Whichever empire purchased the soul tools would experience a fall in their wealth. Ladies, please hear me out. Hu Yuhao said. I don't need either of you to raise the price. Hu Yuhao's words dissolved some of the enmity between the two ladies. The Tang sect requires money and resources to grow. We don't belong to any empire, but we don't want lives to be lost because of a war. We are also part of the continent, and we have a common enemy. I hope that our appearance can help the Star Luo, Heavenly Soul and Doling empires, and not cause a rift. That's why we won't raise the price of the soul tools to increase the burden on any empire. As he spoke until here, he turned his attention to Shu Jojo and said, Princess Jojo, I'm very sorry that the two of you met. I really didn't know Princess Wei Ena was coming. It's really just a coincidence. Since both of you are here, however, allow me to say that competing will only lead to greater problems and allow our common enemy to succeed. Let's do it this way. You can use whatever gold soul coins and alloys you have to exchange for the Zhuge Divine crossbow cannon. With sufficient resources, our production can increase. I promise to supply 10 sets of Zhuge Divine crossbow cannons and sealed milk bottles every month. This number will increase once every month to meet your demands. I'll give both empires priority. I'll supply both of your empires before I supply any other partners in the future. That's because both your empires are our first line of defense against the Sun Moon Empire. I think this is the best way to settle the problem. This fellow. The unfriendly look in Shu Jojo's eyes disappeared. Although she wasn't pleased with this, she appreciated Huo Yuhao's rejection of a price increase and attempt to resolve their conflict. At least he understood what was important. Mu Shui furrowed her brow. 10 sets, isn't that too little? Why don't you set an asking price, and we'll buy the blueprints for these 2 soul tools? We'll try to satisfy your asking price for these 2 soul tools. She was very bold. It seemed like Mu Shui wasn't ordinary either. Huo Yuhao thought for a moment, but then immediately shook his head and said, apologies, it involves secrets of the Tang sect. We definitely can't sell our techniques. 10 sets is a conservative estimate. From what I know, each of the Sun Moon Empire's soul engineering divisions is equipped with around 100 long-range cannons. They are around the standard of Class 4 soul cannons. There are less than 10 cannons that are of a Class 6 standard. Although I'm not really sure, I believe there are no more than 10 such divisions. This also means that it will only take 1 year for your empires to build up pretty strong defenses given our current rate of supply. Shu Jojo snorted and said, how is it so simple? The Sun Moon Empire isn't just about those few soul engineering divisions. Huo Yuhao replied, alright, I'm really not sure how strong they are. However, what do the 2 of you think about my proposition? This is the best resolution I can find for now. Shu Jojo looked at Wei Ena, and discovered that Wei Ena was looking back at her. After pondering for a while, both princesses nodded their heads without hesitation. It's a deal. It's a deal. Huo Yuhao also revealed a smile on his face. Of course, he was clear that this matter wasn't just so simple. These 2 princesses weren't ordinary people. Let's sign a contract then. Shu Jojo knew exactly not to take things as they were. Wei Ena's actions earlier had already put her on alert. They took some time to discuss the details of the contract before they finished, which took around 2 hours. One of the most important clauses was that the Star Luo and Heavenly Soul Empires couldn't contact the Tang sect privately and go against the contract. Whenever either party purchased soul tools from Tang sect, they had to inform the other party. The Tang sect also had to prioritize both empires whenever they were selling new types of soul tools. If the Tang sect could produce a sufficient number of Zhuge Divine crossbow cannons and sealed milk bottles, they had to supply both empires as best they could. When the room was finally quiet again, Huo Yuhao's eyes were already filled with fatigue. Wang Donga carried him to his bed and gave him a simple massage. I'd rather compete and face a strong opponent than negotiate with them, Wang Donga sighed. You must be very tired, Yuhao. Huo Yuhao nodded lightly and said, this is what the Tang sect has to go through in order to develop. Not only have we received our most important order, but we have also developed a greater understanding of the management of both empires at the highest level. Wang Donga lowered her voice and said, do you know what Princess Jojo referred to when she mentioned the strength of the Sun Moon Empire? Huo Yuhao lowered slightly and said, I can roughly guess. It should be the advanced level soul engineers and soul tools. Truly strong soul tools will not be given to the soul engineering teams. Although Shu Jojo didn't mention it, I can tell from her expression that it's something scary. Wang Donga nodded and revealed a lost look. She said, Yuhao, do you think a war is really coming? What should we do then? Huo Yuhao squinted and said, we can't avoid a war. I only want to protect the people around me. If my body has recovered by the time the war starts, then I will. To every empire, the tournament was very prestigious. It was held once every 5 years, and the host would alternate between the 4 empires. It wasn't easy to host the tournament. Although the Sun Moon Empire's proposed change to the tournament regulations received resistance from many sects and academies on the continent, it eventually still passed. There was a simple reason why the Sun Moon Empire didn't restrict the difficulty of the tournament. As soul tools continued to develop, future battles would be a challenge of soul masters and soul engineers' control of soul tools. If one couldn't excel in this area, how could he be called an elite? Although this was an advantage for the Sun Moon Empire, every rational person had to admit it was true. The Sun Moon Empire wasn't wrong. Finally, the tournament was about to begin. No matter what games were played between the Sun Moon Empire and the various parties involved in the tournament, the Empire decided to hold the tournament in a vast plain at the outskirts. This was a good thing for the Empire. They could accommodate more spectators in this way. The lot drawing ceremony was held on the eve of the tournament. Shu Sanxia was the one who represented the Tang sect for the lot drawing ceremony. There were a total of 167 competing teams. The fortunate team that drew an empty lot didn't have to compete in the first round of the tournament. Shu Sanxi's luck wasn't so good, and thus Tang sect still had to compete in the first round. The Empire decided to give the empty lot to Shrek Academy, and thus Wang Chua's team managed to proceed to the next round. They were awarded 12 full points. No one raised any objections to this preferential treatment. After all, Shrek Academy was an established academy in this tournament. This was what they deserved. Morning. As the first ray of sunlight shone from the east, the streets of Radiant City were already greeted with a weird scene. Soldiers clad in silver armor stood in two long parallel rows. They extended from the doors of the Mingyu Hotel all the way to an unknown destination. The path they formed was also restricted from public access, and everyone was asked to stay 30 meters away from this path. Radiant City could hold more people than Star Luo City, so the Empire had activated a large portion of its military to maintain order. This arrangement alone required more than 20,000 soldiers. There was a very austere aura in the air of the streets. Everyone from the Tang sect had already prepared in the morning. Bei Bei was in better shape, but he still couldn't walk. He didn't have too many instructions regarding today's competition. However, Huo Yuhao still went to his room in the early morning. Eldest senior, are you feeling better? Huo Yuhao asked the pale-looking Bei Bei. Oh, I'm much better. With my healing speed, I should be able to compete in 10 days. Bei Bei smiled as he spoke. He had already regained his elegant composure. Huo Yuhao said, we are going to compete. Eldest senior, do you have any instructions for us? Bei Bei shook his head and said, what's there to instruct? I believe in all of you. Go. This time, we are fighting for the Tang sect's glory and ourselves. While we are still young, it's time for us to shine. I'm waiting for all of you to return victorious. Definitely. Huo Yuhao nodded forcefully. With Wang Dong's help, everyone from Tang sect put on some light makeup. This didn't change their appearance too much. However, there were slight changes to everyone's facial features, even on closer observation. Along with their own development, it was difficult for others to tell that they were the Shrek 7 monsters that had once created miracles in the last tournament. Of course, this would only last until they demonstrated their powers in this tournament. After all, they couldn't conceal their martial souls. Huo Yuhao still wanted Ji Juechen, Jing Xian, and Nana to stay and take care of Bei Bei. However, Bei Bei didn't let him do so. No one wanted to miss such a great event. As Ji Juechen and Jing Xian were already more than 20, they could only tag along as teachers. Everyone from the Tang sect changed into the same warrior robes. Their warrior robes were specially designed. There were silver embroidered lines on their white warrior robes, and these lines eventually gathered at the back, forming the words Tang sect. Although there was a 30 meters restriction on the public, there were still many people who gathered to watch the competing teams as they exited the hotel. When the Tang sect team appeared, they immediately caused a huge uproar. Hey, look at this. This team is so weird. Why is there someone in a wheelchair? Is he allowed to compete in a wheelchair? Tang sect. It seems like a sect. Has anyone heard of them before? They seem to be an ancient sect. However, I heard that they've already collapsed. They've even sent a team with a cripple. Haha, this is funny. Can a cripple also be considered an elite? No one from the Tang sect bothered with the commotion. Since Huo Yuhao dared to come in a wheelchair, he of course expected all this to happen. His abilities were the best way he could shut their mouths. Huo Yuhao shut his eyes as he sat in the wheelchair. However, his spiritual power followed the path and extended forward into the distance. He was sensing the conditions of all the teams that had come to compete in this tournament, and sent this information to his teammates. Huo Yuhao was already getting used to his disability. He had also discovered that this wasn't really a bad thing for him. While his abilities were restricted, being disabled also made him more reliant on his spiritual power. Over this short period of time, Huo Yuhao had already begun to grasp many concepts that helped him to evolve his purple demon eyes and the spiritual level of his concrete immaterial realm. He was starting to use his spiritual type abilities more and more efficiently. There were more than 2,000 people from the 167 teams. All of them left Radiant City. The tournament venue was on the outskirts of the city. Once they passed the buildings in the city, they could see it from afar. Right now, the area was crowded with people, with more than 30,000 soldiers maintaining order. The crowd was divided into different regions, segregated from the grandeur of the main arena. To the north, there was a high platform made that looked like it could accommodate 1,000 people. The platform was more than 10 meters high, and more than 100 meters across. The wide platform shone with a silvery white glow, and appeared to be made from metal. Even though it was just a platform, it was an extremely huge one. There weren't any seams or breaks in it at all. The weird thing was that there seemed to be a groove around the platform. There was a transparent barrier stained with dim yellow that rose into the sky coming out of that groove. The ends of the barrier couldn't be seen. How high did one's soul power have to be to support this barrier? Furthermore, it was possible to tell this was different from the last tournament. At least, no one could be struck off the stage and end up as a loser so easily. One had to completely defeat their opponent to win. Beside the platform, there were huge soul screens extending 100 meters from the center of the tournament stage. These soul screens were held in the air by tall scaffolding, and every screen was more than 20 square meters in size. Only the Sun Moon Empire possessed such soul tool techniques. There were more than 100 such screens set up around the tournament stage. This video will end here. Thank you for watching.